Hi, welcome to the Beacon Hill Report with State Senator Joan Lovely. I'm your host, Walt KOSMOWSKI. And Senator, it's been a few months since we've been on the set here with you.
It has been, and that's completely my fault.
Oh, stop it now.
But thank you for the opportunity to come back and address your viewers.
Yeah, well, I know that you're one of the hardest working and busiest people that I know, so we are thrilled here that you're able to come into the studio and do these kinds of programs and bring your constituents and our viewers up to date on what's happening in the State House.
Thank you.
And we're sitting here, it's December 18th, almost the end of the year. The formal session has wrapped, correct?
That's correct.
So what, in your opinion, have been some of the more significant accomplishments of this legislative session?
So the formal session ended on July 31st. On August 1st, we went into what we call informal sessions, where we continue to work. By Constitution, we have to hold an informal session every 72 hours. So that's Mondays and Thursdays, year-round.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, and if a Monday falls on New Year's Day, we'll be in on New Year's Day. So, what we aren't required to do in an informal session is to attend. Formal sessions we must attend, because we have roll call votes. Informal sessions, there's no requirement, but I try to make as many as I can. I'm in the State House anyway. And so we've been very busy, but at the end of July, when we finished our formal session, you know, we worked on the budget. We put together a very good state budget, just a little north of $42 billion. I was actually named as Vice Chair of Ways and Means back in the spring, early spring. And the chair of Ways and Means, Karen Spilka, became our president in July. We elected her as our president in July. So I, de facto, I'm now leading Senate Ways and Means as the vice chair. She didn't choose to fill her seat. She will do that in January. But I've led the Ways and Means efforts since July. And it's been a great experience. So we've passed a lot of bills in the informal session. But back to formal session, we worked on environmental bond bill, again to work on global warming, to make sure that Massachusetts is meeting our own set goals with the Global Warming Solution Act. We want to make sure that we are using more renewable energy and trying to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. As you know, we no longer have any coal burning plants in Massachusetts.
Right.
We're trying to wean ourselves off oil. We're using more natural gas, but we still want to get to 100% renewables, you know, in the next few decades. So that's something we've worked on. We worked on.
You have now. I believe that you have set a date for that. The state has set a date for.
We have. Yep. So 2030, we're working on our renewable portfolio standards, and that is where utility companies commit to using a certain amount of their electricity from renewables, from solar and wind. So we've actually increased that, going up to 2030. But the Global Warming Solution Act, I believe it's 2050, where we want to be able to get to a much higher number of, and I'm not sure, I don't have that figure with me, when we're going to 100%. But that's a strong goal that we're working towards. It's important. It's critical, really. I mean, you see what's happening across our world with, you know, with the warming of our planet, and you know. It seems like as time goes on, every report from the scientists gets more and more dire. It does. You know, we see these storms. The hurricanes are getting worse. We're seeing much more flooding, and now seeing flooding in our areas as well. So it's only going to continue to get worse. And
and I know that the city of Beverly has a consultant group out of Boston, which talks about the level. You know, they have several scenarios that go out 30 years and even out to 2070. To say that if the sea rise is a minimum or moderate or maximum, to see the effect on our shoreline here. And they had some stakes up at Lynch Park, and they showed that a 50% possible storm 30 years out would put Lynch Park under 3 feet of water. So
Absolutely.
It's
and
crazy.
all the homes that surround it as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You know, so the federal government rewrote the flood insurance guidelines, you know, a few years ago and put those into place. So people who thought that they weren't in a flood zone are now in a flood zone.
In a flood zone, yeah.
And as a result are paying much higher premiums because of that. So we've got to take this seriously. We are here in our state. Other states are as well, and you know, in other countries. Yeah.
Well, we're kind of lucky because our coastline isn't like, for instance, Florida, where Florida is a gigantic sandbar, if you will, and I think the highest point in Florida is something like 150 feet above sea level, and that's it. So,
nothing to protect them.
Nothing, absolutely nothing to protect. So who knows? In 50 years, you know, Florida might be a skinny little.
It
you know,
absolutely
spit of land.
Could be.
So, yeah.
You know, we actually also allocated some funding for Green Energy Park, the you know, the solar field that's right here. Right, exactly, to re-energize that, and again get that back into the energy producing. This is very strong. I want to give a big shout out to all the environmental activists that I hear across Beverly and across the district and the North Shore and the Commonwealth. They're really making an impact.
And of course our mayor, Mike Cahill, is very, very strong in trying to get solar more and more. He's looking at all kind of possibilities to put solar panels around city-owned property.
It's very smart, you know, to canopy, say the parking lot right here at Beverly High School. If you canopy the lot with solar panels on top of that, it cuts down on, it keeps cars cooler. It absorbs all that that energy into those solar panels. It could probably, I don't know how much it would power this high school, but probably a good portion. Cuts down on plowing. And you see that at airports across the country and now different municipalities. It's the way of the future.
All right. So, anything else as far as the legislative session that you wanna mention?
You know what? We worked on an economic bond bill as well, and so that we wanted to make sure that we are, you know, working towards keeping our folks working. So we put in also some workforce training programs. MassWorks. The MassWorks program is a grant program that funds a tremendous amount of need across our municipalities, our cities and towns. And right here in Beverly, $2.5 million revitalization of Cabot Street. You know, so you see all this road construction. You know, so they're going down in, you know, and doing all the infrastructure underneath, you know, replacing water lines, sewer lines, gas lines. If you're going to redo the street, you want to make sure everything underneath is in good repair, so it's not going to break down. You have to go back in. And then new streetscapes, it really adds to the quality of life. So those are some of the things that we've worked on. That's really very important. And
I do want to mention, Senator, that if people want to get an idea of how much $42 billion is, the city of Beverly's budget, yearly budget, is a little over $100 million. And so 40 billion would be 400 times. So you can imagine the complexity of that kind of budget and how far-reaching it is.
It can be. It can very much be. It's very complex. I'll tell you. There was a lot of need, and that's why our cities and towns depend on state and federal government for funding. You know, whether it's Chapter 90 funds, which is used again for highway and road repair. Most of our roads are really local roads. You know, we have our highways, but if you think about it, most of our roads are local roads, and they are in constant need of repair because if we live in New England, you know, we're not from Florida, as you said, where the roads are in good repair all the time. They have their other issues with flooding and storms, but we're always having to repair our roads and bridges, and we want to make those funds available.
Now, as you sit here, you say you're in an informal session now, where every 72 hours there is an official meeting or official session called?
The House and Senate meet every Monday and Thursday morning at 11 a.m. And so bills literally get walked back and forth between the two chambers, which are on opposite ends of the State House. And so that they can be passed, you know, in those sessions. And we're working hard right now to get some final bills done.
And outside of that effort, Senator Lovely, you and your other fellow legislators during this off season, if I can call it that, although it's not really. So what other activities, or what do you try to focus on between formal sessions?
Well, so the way it's designed, it's very interesting. I find it somewhat interesting. You know, so we have out of 2 years, 18 months we're in formal session.
Right.
And then we end that again on August 1st, and a lot of people go out to get reelected.
Yep.
I was fortunate enough to have an opponent this session, so I was able to use that time to get back into my district. I was campaigning, but I was also catching up with my constituents, whereas you know, during the formal part of the year, it's a little harder to see folks consistently as much as I would like to see them, which is pretty often. We do our office hours every Monday morning in a different community, in the senior centers and in coffee shops, and I go to people's living rooms, wherever it might be convenient. And so I was actually able to have a little bit of fun as well, and back in August, did the Ice Bucket Challenge in Lynch Park for Pete Frady's and the Frady's family with the Beverly Police Department. That's always so much fun to get doused and raise some funding and still continue to raise the awareness. And then Pete's Park opened. Yep. You were there. You filmed that amazing celebration of that beautiful park that's been revitalized right in Pete's own neighborhood. Yep. We actually got to go. My daughter and I grabbed our 3 Labrador retrievers and went into a dog wash, charity dog wash at Care One, right over on Essex Street, and got them washed. And believe me, labs need to be bathed often, so that was a lot of fun. And, you know, different things like that, where I get out into the community to be able to, you know, just be with my friends and constituents. Yeah, we actually
went to that same dog wash.
Yeah, there was.
And I must say that you know, in my role here as executive director at BevCam, I'm involved in a lot of activities and outreach and so forth. And I'm primarily Beverly-centric here in my role, and I see you everywhere. And then you've got 4 other communities that you're involved in, and I can't stop being amazed at your ability to kind of be everywhere and be involved in all these different things. So
thank you. You know what? I love it. You know, having been raised here in Beverly, this is my backyard, if you will. I've been raised right here in my own backyard. Living in Salem now for 35 plus years. I've been married for 34 to a Salem boy, and we've raised our family there. So Salem's my home community, and Danvers and Peabody and Topsfield have been wonderful to get to know, and have made a lot of friends, and it's just been great to be able to work with community leaders, business leaders, and political leaders, and people in general. Been very welcoming, and I think it's important that as an elected official that you are accessible, and that's my mission, to be accessible, to make sure people know that I'm just not driving into Boston, sitting in an office all day, and driving home and not seeing folks.
And the kind of thing we're doing right now, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit as well. So before we do that, as you gear up for the next session, is there anything specific or specific areas that you're focusing on?
Yeah, so one particular issue that I've been focused on since I've been in the legislature is child sexual abuse. A lot of folks know that I'm a victim, or I call myself a survivor of sexual abuse at the age of 6. Not an easy topic to talk about, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it or listen to it, because a lot of people think, well, it doesn't happen in my world. But unfortunately, it does. Yep. The experts tell us that 90% of sexual abuse goes unreported from children. And the reason I know that is because when children become adults, then they report, or there's some type of mental health issue, a substance abuse issue, or some type of...
reflects back.
It reflects back, exactly. A lot of people repress memory. Sure. So it's been a mission of mine since I've been in the legislature to be able to strengthen our laws, to make sure that no child is exposed to sexual abuse. And so I filed a bill. This was my 3rd session filing the bill. I'm going into my 4th session. I'll refile the bill. Sometimes it takes years to get a bill through.
No, and don't we know it?
Yes, and I've always treated the bill I've filed as a working draft, and it gets better and better as I file it. I think with the exposure of incidents and stories that you hear, Pittsburgh, for instance, it happened over the summer, again in the church realm. you know, where priests were exposed.
Right.
You know, people they're tired of it, they're listening, and we're going to continue to work on it to, again, it's about prevention. It's also about awareness. I want to just make sure that folks are trained to know what to look for. So that's an issue that I will continue to champion.
Right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Now, let's talk about local access TV. You are a very good friend of local access television. In fact, last year, Mass Access, which is the umbrella group in Massachusetts that we local access stations here belong to, awarded you the Legislator of the Year award. Very, very rightly so.
Very proud.
Well,
thank you.
Well, you deserve
proud
that.
To receive it.
Now, I don't know whether I know you know this, but I don't know if our viewers know this, but community access television is under attack by the cable companies. Always. I mean, they try to keep us under wraps. We've been trying to get a bill passed in the state for the cable companies to broadcast us in high definition, which we're not, and we're so conspicuous when people channel surf. Everything is in high def, and we're in standard definition, and we're not on the electronic program guide. These are just a couple of things. So right now the FCC has promulgated a ruling which would, in effect, defund or seriously gut the funding that local access gets. And if I may, with your indulgence, just to explain to our viewers that local access television like BevCam exists because of enabling legislation that was passed by the U.S. Congress in 1984. And it had a long name, but let's call it the Cable Act. And what that Cable Act stipulated was that if a cable company comes into a community like Beverly or New York City or Los Angeles or any city or town across the country, for the ability to use the rights of way and to dig trenches and put up poles and put up their wires and so forth, they then would quid pro quo give the city funds and resources to allow its citizens to produce local non-commercial television like is produced in our studio here. And that's been going on for 30-some, almost 35 years. This ruling that has been promulgated by the FCC would essentially gut that by allowing the cable companies to deduct certain costs, which up until this time they've been defined and they've borne those costs. Now they want to be able to deduct those costs from what they're obligated to give the town per the franchise agreement that we've been talking about. Right. I know that you the FCC has had a period where there's been a public comment, the ability to do a public comment, which the latest one ended last Friday, a week ago. I guess no, not tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, and it was they got thousands of replies in favor of local access television, saying that the FCC should not change anything, and they came from individuals, from cities and towns, from community organizations, church organizations. Legal opinions were filed. There were literally thousands and thousands, and hundreds of editorials across the country. And I know that you signed on to a letter, and I'd like maybe our control room maybe to put up that letter. And I'm just going to read a couple of, I know they can't read from that, but I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs here. We are a group of Massachusetts state senators who are greatly concerned by the newly proposed FCC rule, which would drastically reduce funding for local community access television. The rule, pushed by the telecom industry, would allow cable providers to deduct the cost of local programming from the franchising fees they pay to cities and towns. This change would severely affect public access stations' ability to provide our communities with free access to important local news and other information. Community access television plays a vital role in keeping the communities we represent informed about local issues and politics, as well as providing access to educational programming. In a time when other means of sharing local information, such as newspapers, are suffering, we must preserve and expand more modern methods of community engagement, such as television. If adopted, this rule would force our municipalities to find alternative methods of funding or to abandon these essential services altogether, the latter of which is equally unaffordable. And I want to thank you for that. And of course, local access is nowhere better portrayed than what we're doing right now. So you, as our local representative, and others like you across the country, Senator, can come into a station like this and tape a show, and we can air it on local television, and people can know what's going on in the community. Just the same as we air city council meetings and school committee meetings, and we show local sports. And one of our channels is dedicated to the students in the school, where they can create programming, they can be involved in the community, they can hone their skills, they can be effective members of the community by participating in this representative representative government and being part of a community. So to lose this, I think, would just be unconscionable on the part of the FCC.
It would be. It would be. I mean, local access television is just critical to communicating right into our communities. You know, I mean, you can turn on any of the major news stations or, you know, cable stations and be entertained by different shows. This is actual real information coming at the local level that would be gone. It would, yeah, it's because critical.
CBS, NBC, ABC,
right.
Fox, they're not going to report. They're not going to let Joan Lovely come on and say what,
right.
what's going on in the state in the state senate. And I just want to read something. This is this is the FCC. This is from the government website. The mission of the FCC is to make available, so far as possible, to all the people of the United States without discrimination, efficient nationwide and worldwide communication services with adequate facilities at reasonable charges. That is the mission and the charge of the FCC. And I just want to, I apologize if I'm showing my political hat here, but this is life or death for. But among the many editorials that have been written, there's one here, and I'm just going to read one sentence of this is called the Berkshire Eagle, and where are they from? Pittsfield. This is in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts, out in the Berkshires. And they say, quote, a recently proposed rule change by that body, meaning the FCC, however, suggests that the FCC is more interested in creating loopholes through which cable carriers can fatten their profits at public expense than in the welfare of the people it is commissioned to serve, as outlined by their mission statement. So, in my opinion, I think it's become a sort of, in government, you see it a lot, where it's kind of like the fox guarding the chicken coop. The people that are supposed to protect us or supposed to represent certain constituents are not reporting, and they're actually anti those constituents. Right. And I might mention that the chairman of the FCC, Mr. Pai, for 12 years was a lobbyist and a lawyer for Verizon. So, you know, where do his sympathies lie?
What we don't want to see is pitting cable companies, large cable companies, against smaller, you know, PEG access television stations like yourself.
Right.
Local cable access, you know. So we're bringing in, you know, public, educational, and governmental information. It really will stifle, you know, not free speech, but yes, you know, to a certain extent, perhaps First Amendment rights. That from what should be a strong partnership between cable providers and local access stations, which is the mission of why we're even sitting here, is now going to become adversarial, and that's not a good place to be.
It absolutely is not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I do want to thank you for that letter. And it's indicative of a lot of communication that has been sent to the FCC by legislators, and city officials and government officials, and as I say, across the spectrum, from individuals. I've had many of my producers here at BevCam sent comments to the
We've
FCC.
heard, a lot of input into my office on this issue. I will tell you that it's a very bipartisan issue. That letter was authored by Senator Dean Tran. He's Republican from Western Massachusetts, and you will see both Democrats and Republicans signing on to this. It is a community issue. We all recognize it, and we all want to see local cable access television stations continue to grow and thrive, and not be not be curtailed or closed down.
So I just, for the sake of our viewers, not to leave them in suspense, right now the comment period is over, and the FCC is going to take a vote or whatever they do on this, and they could either approve it, they could not approve it. They could just let it sit like a law goes into committee and just sits there, or they could say we want to re-review it and invite more comments. But even then, there are a lot of there's a period where you can legal challenges would, one of the legal challenges is simply that we, BevCam, has a contract, the city has a contract that is a 10-year contract. So if this happened, it would usurp that contract, and so that's one legal challenge.
That breaks the terms.
Breaks the term.
Right.
Exactly. So we're waiting to see, and we think that we have enough constituents and stakeholders on our side, such as yourself, that this will not happen. Just like when 3 times now they've tried to bring in state franchising to the state of Massachusetts, which would have gutted the ability of the city of Beverly and other cities to negotiate with the cable company. And as we saw in states where that has happened, the local access went black. And we fought them 3 times, and 3 times we won. And they finally, I guess, folded up their tent and went their way. So thank you for that, Senator. And is there anything else now? It's close to the Christmas season, and or it really is the Christmas season. We're sitting here December 18th. So anything else you want to mention to our viewers before we close this session? Well,
I will tell you, so we are in the middle of our fiscal year, so we start our fiscal year on July 1st. Here we are in December. But we're already talking about next year's budget. So just a couple of weeks ago, we had our consensus revenue hearing. And essentially what that is that we have academics, budget analysts, Department of Revenue, treasurer, come in and testify to the legislature, to the Ways and Means Committee on both the House and Senate. I chaired on the Senate side. Chairman Jeff Sanchez, who is actually leaving the House, but he chaired on the House side. And we listened to these experts tell us, what is the growth going to look like over the next fiscal year? Very important. We need to know how much we can grow our budget by. We're looking at for the year 2019, we're looking at fairly good growth. But in 2020, they're predicting we're going to be entering a recession. So we need to start to tighten our belt.
Okay.
So we've put some more money into our rainy day fund. We have just a little north of $2 billion in our rainy day fund. Many would argue that that's not enough. I would agree with them. I would say that we need to continue to do that, to save for a rainy day. And so we are listening to our analysts as we put together the budget that we will pass next July, June 30th. It's always a half a year in advance that we are planning, but it shows that the state is planning, going forward to make sure that we are adequately protected so we can continue to provide the services that our residents need. Well,
no rest for you, Senator.
No rest for the weary.
I wish
it's all good. I
wish you a good holiday, and I would thank you for being here with us. And I'd like to remind our viewers, you've been watching the Beacon Hill Report with State Senator Joan Lovely. I'm your host, Walt KOSMOWSKI, and we'll see you next time.